Welcome back, everyone, for a film that I didn't know I was going to be making. On the very last day our last film was posted, I went for a walk and stopped in stunned silence outside the window of this charity shop. And if you've seen our Julian Rose video, you'll know why. Did you spot a quick glimpse of another label that fashion historians amongst you will know was connected to Julian Rose? Susan Small. It's listed in the timecodes in the description box. Heard of it? It was a very long-standing and popular label based in London, which, like Julian Rose, and we're very, very sorry to say, doesn't exist any longer. But no worries, because we're talking about it today and we'll do again in the future. So don't forget to subscribe, because you'll see why it was so successful when that video's here. Susan Small has loads of history about it and was stocked for years at the house of Mirelle. It also ran for some of the same years Julian Rose was open and was one of the longest lasting fashion labels in the 40 years of Mirelle. And yes, eagle-eyed fashionistas amongst you will already know what I was told by showroom girl Sue. There was another more personal connection between Julian Rose and Susan Small, which you'll already know about if you're reading our Instagram at the House of Mirelle's. So if you want a spoiler, go back and read our posts about our Julian Rose film and read the comments from the fantastic Dr. Liz Tregenza, who knows all about wholesale couture. Google her if you want to know more, and if you don't know, we'll tell you at the end what that personal connection was. But if you want the oh my gosh moment I had, pause this right now and go and watch video 22. If you're in a hurry, you could follow the time codes in the description box below it by clicking on the one titled Susan Small Gown Autumn Winter 1950. So pause this now if you want to, because spoilers are definitely coming up. Have you watched it and got back here with that in your mind? Yeah, I bet you're thinking the same thing I was. So I was completely stunned to see this dress in a shop window in 2023. Isn't the 1950 gown by Susan Small so similar to this one? What do you think, folks? Well, yeah, you can see it too, right? I thought it was so much of a coincidence that I'd post an extra film for you all, lovely followers, so you can see it too. And we can have a look at what's similar and also what's different, apart from the colour, of course. In the Julian Rose film, the Susan Small dress we're going to compare with this one was included because I talk about how fashion houses advertised using stock images. That's the photos the fashion house themselves took to advertise a particular dress or suit or ensemble, not like the ones I've taken through a window. The Susan Small gown was also in the Winter Splendour fashion show programme and was part of the story I told in that film. The programme was already donated to the Mirelle archive by Little Val, who you met again there modelling in the salon and also photographed in the programme. There's an awful lot of reading books and research that goes into bringing you these stories about Mirelle, and it involves looking around for info about the labels sold at Mirelle, like Susan Small, and researching them too. And that's why I had the first snap moment. It's between this article published in August 1950 and the same dress in the Winter Splendour programme. The Sketch was a magazine that finished in June 1959, so it was very much focused on marketing the couture clothes that were sold in places like Mirelle during the 40s and 50s. Watch video 21 if you want to know more about that. There were 2 Susan Small dresses in the feature by Elizabeth Penrose, but we're just going to focus on this one and look at how it's the same and different from the one in the window and what that says about fashion and textiles as well. The first thing you can't ignore is the colour. In my first photo, it looks more of a pastel-y shade, doesn't it? Similar to a pale lemon yellow. But when I stepped out of the daylight and looked inside with artificial lightening, it's far stronger. And by lightening, I meant lightning, of course. Oh dear. A bit like the sun's come out in the shop window, and absolutely beautiful. You'll probably remember, because it's only a couple of years ago now, but yellow was big in 2021 and named as one of 2 colours of the year, unusually, by the Pantone Colour Institute, who names colours to watch, as it were, in December in advance every year. I wonder what 2024's is going to be. What do you think? Gosh, not long to wait now. And usually you see the influence on textiles and interiors pretty quickly. We think the modern dress was bought since then. What's also interesting about 2021 is that they teamed it with another shade we see absolutely everywhere. You've guessed it, grey. Aha, they noticed, they matched, it was no accident, and we really like it because of fashion history, of course, because it's not the first time those shades have been paired. Here's an article you'll have seen already in our feature-length run-through about Hull's history and fashion history called The Locations. I'll link it down below. Used in 1948 as a colour combo, yellow and grey still has that vintagey feel that sparks off loads of thoughts about 50s textiles like this one, which was developed by an artist called Lucienne Day in conjunction with Glasgow School of Arts Centre for Advanced Textiles, bringing the past into the present by reproducing calyx, this fabric design from back then. Google it if you want to buy some. It's specially printed on an order-by-order basis, though, a bit like some of Mirelle's clothes were, and so it's understandably pricey, but you'll be buying into fashion history if you do. Doesn't grey go so well with yellow, as we've seen since 2021? Well, looking at the yellow dress in comparison with the Susan Small gown, they chose another soft, muted pastel shade. You can't see it in either photo because it's black and white, so use your imagination. Their description, which probably came from Susan Small advertising team, was, quote, a flurry of pale pink tulle, the shimmering skirt married to a bodice of pale pink sequins. Now, isn't married such a great way of describing the waist seam, which could be quite bulky when attaching layers of net and underlay to the sequin shell in the bodice, and makes the whole dress sound extremely well designed and made. I also think it suggests to the reader that you wouldn't feel a bulky, scratchy seam around your waist, and perhaps that was a problem for this style of dress in that era. What do you think? Or do you remember that being the case? Pale pink isn't the same as the modern tone of blush, by the way. Blush is a more stony, grey, neutral. Pale pink is especially feminine and nods to ballerinas who really did inspire gowns like these. What pink do you picture in your mind that their pale pink is? Here's a colour chart from Wikipedia. Have a guess and let us know down below, or on our Facebook or on our Instagram. We'd love to see what you choose, and we'll tell you what we thought it was at the end of this video. Pink was a major colour trend in the early 50s. On House of Mirelle UK, there's an article called Think Pink, which you can read by searching for Think Pink in the search bar. As you can see, it was a colour trend way before Barbie appeared this year. We don't know if Susan Small produced it in other tones, but variations in the colour scheme of the modern dress show it was produced in blush and maroon as well, and some have short skirts too. Susan Small priced the dress at about 21 guineas. Can you remember from our other videos, or maybe you were around to know how much a guinea was back then? Yeah, that's right. It was £1.05 in old sterling before decimalisation that we have today came in. So that makes it about £22.05 in old money, which would be, according to the Bank of England inflation calculator, are you ready? Because it's an incredible hike between the two dresses. About £619.19 today. A lot of money, but it would be. Like Julian Rose, it would have been designed and made entirely in-house from their studio at 53 Wells Street in London. And here's that building in the present day. Don't forget, we're making a film taking you around all these locations in London, so subscribe and hit the bell notification icon, as YouTube will do all the work for you and let you know when it's here. In contrast to the price of the Susan Small gown, a brief look on Google Lens sends us off to ASOS, where the yellow dress is described as, quote, Maya Bridesmaid Delicate Sequin Bardo High-Low Maxi Dress in lemon. So the shade was pretty much right when I said lemon. It turns out, it says it's out of stock, by the way, but it was originally £90 and is now £28.80. So that's a difference of over £500 from the Susan Small gown when full price, and a hell of a lot more off at their sale price. Yup, it's a considerable difference, and we'll look why in a bit. If you're thinking it's the fabric, well, I'd have to agree with you. That is part of, but not all of it. The fabric in the modern gown is all synthetic, probably a polyester mix in the skirt and a ready-made sequin mesh you can see in these pictures, which can be produced in large quantities very cheaply also. Remember, online sellers are online. Bricks and mortar sellers like the House of Mirelle had all sorts of additional costs to deal with. Susan Small, in common with many fashion houses, produced short runs of items, which mean they didn't produce in the quantities that are produced today, a sales strategy called scaling. If you produce large runs of items in large quantities and they're able to be manufactured cheaply abroad and by machine rather than the hand sewing and short runs we talk about in the Julian Rose film, then your profit margins will increase, to put it plainly. Some of you are probably listening to this having lived through the big change that was seen in fashion between the 60s and the 80s. And if you've watched the film called Maureen's Memories, that's number 21, and the locations, you'll remember all too well how mass production that Mary Quant extolled changed the couture fashions of the 50s into what we wear today. So, let's see about scale, and particularly where the Susan Small dress was sourced. And before you comment, there was no internet in 1950. I haven't forgotten. So let's see what this sketch article says. The article mentions two shops it could be found at. The first in London, no surprise there, at a place called Galeries Lafayette in Regent Street. A side note on this, advertising like this from the 30s says Galeries Lafayette was London's only Paris shop, which would have made it sound very attractive. The second location is in Northern Ireland, Renée of Belfast, which is again really interesting, as over the 40 years Mirelle was open, it was often mentioned in a list of places that would have included Mirelle too. They were peers, in other words. Renée of Belfast was actually Renée Meneely, by the way, but they shortened it to Renée because everyone would have known where that was, a bit like Mirelle for the House of Mirelle. We don't know why other stockists weren't mentioned, perhaps because of space within the article, or that at Susan Small's end in August others hadn't been confirmed, but it shows the one item to one outlet sales strategy in operation. The same that Raymond Zelka, owner of the label Polly Peck we talk about in video 21, also spoke about then. Certainly in those days, Mirelle's staff talk very clearly about one item being ordered and delivered with one to sell only. And records from the stockist section where to buy in British Vogue shows that Mirelle really had no competitors for miles around Hull and East Yorkshire for each of their items. As I said in the Julian Rose video, if they want it, they've got to come to us. And for this dress, it would have been the only one available, paraded by Olga and the team down the Winter Splendour catwalk, which customers of other clothes bought at Mirelle fashion shows say they knew they had to snap it up there and then. It was also very strategic of Mira and Molly in their buying practices, right through into when they were in Carmichael's in the 70s. So we've looked at colour, textiles, manufacturer, and buying and selling. Let's check out what the designs are like side by side. We can't see the interior of the Susan Small gown, but it definitely has two shoulder straps holding it up. And in the black and white photo, they look quite iridescent and shiny, don't they? Matching the sequin bodice well. It's a boob tube, in other words, probably lightly boned underneath, which helps the fabric retain its structure and modesty on the body of the owner. But the modern dress is different in the way it's designed and made. The modern gown is obviously not strapless. It has a matching yellow scooped neckline as a shell underneath, attached to the skirt, a bit like a tank top, except the fabric's sheer and tight on the body. And overlaid on that is the sequined mesh, which you'll recall from Workroom 4, called Alterations, 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 is a wholly net-like fabric with sequins in top of it. Remember that? Good. In the yellow dress, the mesh is stretchy and malleable, also making floaty cap sleeves. We can't see it, of course, because we're not up close like that one, but the Susan Small sequins look as if they're not on a mesh top, perhaps even hand sewn on, which would explain the price, wouldn't it? Don't forget, though, that even way back in the 40s, when workroom girl Eileen looked at our black dress in Alterations, Alterations, she said of fabric like the one used then, you could get that in Hull. Which means even in the immediate post-war period, the engines of industry had started whirring. She started at Mirelle in 46, and manufacturers could and would generate complicated and luxurious fabric, which meant seamstresses or workrooms didn't have to hand sew on beads or sequins, unless you were making haute couture, the most expensive or intensive way of making clothing, or you wanted unique embellishments, ones that wouldn't be seen on any other dress or catwalk. We'll come back to this in another video about a company called Doré Leventhal and their tambour workers. But unlike the black dress in the alterations video, the yellow dress does have a finish around the edge of the mesh, which means it's been completed really well. You can see underneath the sleeves around the edge, can you see those two lines? They tuck the raw edge upwards and finish it, making it look much more polished and attractive, unlike our black dress. Finally, let's look at that skirt. The hem is hard to see in both pictures, but it's obvious in both that there's a lot of layering. The description in the lemon yellow dress on ASOS said high-low, which we'll know about buying clothes in the present day means it was higher at the front than at the back of the skirt. I couldn't see that at all, though, in the window, and I think maybe it wasn't. So if you owned this dress, can you tell me whether that high-low is correct? Because I think it was the same length all the way around. The Susan Small team wouldn't have thought of that phrase if their skirt was higher at the front and at the back, though. They'd have probably used the term asymmetric, meaning not symmetrical front and back. But their skirt was symmetrical, you can see that in the photo, and clearly the layers and layers of cloudy tulle that Mirelle wrote into the introduction to a brand spanking new fashion show we haven't seen yet, called Autumn Poem, which took place in 1951 and does contain Susan Small, as it would, because you know that the house of Mirelle had clothes there would not stop for miles and miles around. And yeah, we see the same sort of tulle skirts there too. So we're at the end of this little video and we've got two things to tell you. Have you remembered what they are? We think that the pink is probably a softer shade of 3, by the way. I mean, there's no way of telling, but that was a very popular shade at the time and still would have been every bit as gorgeous as the blush that we all wear today. And the second thing to tell you is that Julian Rose, if you remember, there was a personal connection with Susan Small. Well, he was once married to the then designer at Susan Small before he set up his business after the war. They divorced. Wheels within very small wheels in the British fashion industry. And what a talented couple they would have been. Would you have bought the Susan Small version or the modern day yellow? Let us know in the comments. And if you've made it this far, why not subscribe to our channel? It's totally free. And if you click the bell notification icon, YouTube will literally do all the work for you and tell you whenever anything new is live. And thanks again to all our lovely followers and watchers, and for taking the time to learn more about the fashion house in Hull and the clothes that were sold there that lasted over 40 years.